All right, welcome everybody, and welcome to the Michigan Works Association 2020 Annual Conference. My name is Sally Richard, and I am the Quality Assurance Manager with Upper Peninsula Michigan Works. On behalf of the staff at the association and all of our sponsors, we thank you for being part of the conference. Be sure after this to visit the exhibitor booths during the designated exhibit times. So this session right now is SAE 2020, Opportunities Are Good and Plenty. So before we begin today's session, a couple of housekeeping items. Please make sure that if you are not part of the presentation that you are muted. Questions are going to be taken throughout the presentation, and we'll work with the presenters to get them answered. So please enter your questions in the chat and in the Q&A feature, and we'll make sure to get those answered. Additionally, we're looking forward to any feedback you might have from this session and the conference as a whole. I have put a link to the survey in the chat already, and I will make sure to put one in at the end of the session as well. The presentation for this will be posted after the conference is over, and it'll be able to be seen on the Michigan Works Association website. So now to introduce our presenters, we've got quite a large panel, so please bear with me. First, we have Callan Eschenberg. He's the Apprenticeship Expansion Specialist with the Michigan Department of Labor and Economic Opportunity. We have Natasha Allen, COO of Michigan Works Region 7B. Bill Rail, President of Jackson Area Manufacturers Association. Cheryl Sanford, CEO of Workforce Development Institute. Danielle Bachman, Program Coordinator at Oakland County Michigan Works, and Deb Bruen, Chief Strategy Officer at Upper Peninsula Michigan Works. Go ahead and take it away.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Sally. Thank you everyone for being here. I'm really excited to have this presentation and all of our wonderful panelists. So I am going to go to the next slide of our presentation here. Talking about the opportunities here. So a quick session overview, and then we'll dive into the panel. The State Apprenticeship Expansion, or SAE 2020 initiative, you may have heard, is actually two separate US DOL funded projects. One is the Michigan Registered Apprenticeship Innovation Network, we call MiRAIN. The other is Michigan Youth Apprenticeship Readiness Network, or MiYARN, and those two together make up the SAE 2020 program. In all, that's $14 million, or over $14 million, again, in US DOL funding, and it'll end up helping fill thousands of registered apprenticeship openings, high skill, high wage, in-demand careers. So it'll be actually 5,230 registered apprentices. And of that, 1,024 will be youth registered apprentices. So a quick outline, we'll talk a little bit about MiRAIN, a little bit about MiYARN individually, and we'll have our panelists who are part of our regional implementation consortia talk about their sub-projects, and then we'll open it up for questions and a few questions we have prepared. So what is registered apprenticeship generally? If you're here, hopefully you've at least heard a little bit about it and may be interested. So there's kind of 5 components here. And I know there was a few other sessions that talked about registered apprenticeship as well. Hopefully you were able to join those. But number 1, employer involvement. It starts with a job. Number 2, there is a structured on-the-job learning. So while that person is on the job, they're actually receiving training, or OJT, from experienced mentors. Along with that, related instruction or related technical instruction, and then rewards for skills gains, so increases in wages as the apprentice progresses through their program. And it ends with a national occupational credential. So the USDOL confers a certificate, and there may be some additional education or employer recognized certificates and credentials as well. And just quick note, some non-registered programs may also have these elements. But one thing that is unique to Registered Apprenticeship is, of course, they have all of those, and that's verified and validated through U.S. Department of Labor. So a few other tools and resources outside of our panelists and our subrecipients who will speak about their projects is we have the Michigan Registered Apprenticeship Program website landing page. And I think Sally mentioned these slides will be available, so you can click that link there. One thing we've been working on is a common resource repository for the state that you can find resources and really materials and tools to help you if you're developing a program. Also, Michigan Apprenticeship Readiness Certificate. So that's something that's in development that will confirm competencies and skills in quality pre-apprenticeship programs and will be issued by employers and labor partners along with their educator partners to certify that someone is apprenticeship ready. Also, the Raptor system is a tracking and reporting system. So it's also in development. There will be more to come, but that will be an automated e-tool for tracking and reporting apprentices at the employer and apprentice level. So apprentices and their mentors can actually track all of the necessary data for completing their program, and that'll be online and mobile. And then finally, many of you may have been to in the past some of the apprenticeship learning networks or the ALNs. We're now changing those or moving those into the apprenticeship launch network phase, still ALN. But those will be employer engagement focused, hands-on workshops, and those will be coming out soon. You'll see some dates and invitations, and we hope to have you join us at those as well. So kind of the last two components, we have a Michigan Apprenticeship Advisory Board, which provides guidance, direction, and overall innovation strategy. A few of the folks on, a few of our panelists are on that advisory board as well. But doing the actual implementation after the guidance, direction, and innovation strategy is the Regional Implementation Consortia. So these were partners that applied through a FOA, funding opportunity, or through the state of Michigan for subgrants and received awards through those. So they include employers, organized labor, Office of Apprenticeship or OA training representatives, secondary and post-secondary educational partners, of course, Michigan Works agencies, including their ASCs, some vocational rehabilitation organizations, and others as well. So each of our presenters here are part of this, but here's a full list of the Regional Implementation Consortia. And then on the right, you can see the number of new registered apprentices that they've committed to. So in total, just with this part of the SAE 2020 initiative, that will actually fulfill 3,720 of those over 5,000 positions or registered apprentices. And then again, today we have these 5 individuals from the RICS or Regional Implementation Consortia listed here. And again, you can see their numbers to the right. So we'll go ahead with our panel. I'll just ask them to do a quick 3 to 5 minute on each of their projects, and we will start alphabetically here down that list with Mr. Bill Rail, who's the president of the Jackson Area Manufacturers Association.
Well, thanks, Kellen. So our project is and I'll talk a little bit more about this probably later too, as we ask and answer questions. We are focused on the MiYARN component to the SAE opportunity. So we are focused on youth apprenticeship. We've been doing youth apprenticeship for a number of years, but we've identified some challenges in the way we currently have structured it. So we proposed that we attempt a new model. And so we are working in our 5-county region with our Michigan Works Southeast partners to link together with the K-12 system, primarily the career and tech ed CPIDs in advanced manufacturing and embedding registered apprenticeship opportunities directly into that work. Thanks.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Bill. Sorry, I was looking for the mute button there. Excellent. Thank you. Next, Cheryl Sanford, who is the Chief Executive Officer of the Michigan AFL-CIO Workforce Development Institute.
Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity to be on the panel and talk about expanding apprenticeship opportunities. Our project, which we call Access to Apprenticeship, is a collaboration with our building trades partners, workforce development agencies, the intermediate school districts, as well as community-based organizations to help expand apprenticeship opportunities for underserved populations. So as part of our plan, we will serve, excuse me, focus in particular on minorities, females, veterans, and youth. And we've pulled together partners from several different regions from around the state. Part of this is due to the expansion of our apprenticeship readiness program called Access for All. So we wanted to, because we're already working with building trades in several of those areas, it made sense for us to collaborate on a statewide initiative to increase apprenticeships for those underrepresented populations. So it's just building a really strong foundation and expanding some of the partnerships. We probably got to it a little bit faster because of this opportunity. It sort of put us on a fast track to develop those relationships with educational partners and some workforce development partners that we had not worked with previously. So we're really excited about the opportunity to continue building on expanding apprenticeship opportunities in the building trades.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Cheryl. Next, Natasha Allen, the Chief Operating Officer for Michigan Works Region 7B.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to be able to share about apprenticeship and all the exciting things that are going on just throughout the state of Michigan. We partnered with Great Lakes Bay Michigan Works for this grant, and we really wanted to do it under the umbrella of our My Career Quest. So we partnered together to do a My Career Quest to cover all of our counties, and it was really successful last year. We had almost 10,000 students, and so for a rural area in Michigan, that was pretty significant. And it was a really great opportunity for our employers to provide that hands-on experience. And so when we looked at apprenticeships in our area, and we have in the state of Michigan some of the lowest apprenticeship numbers. So we were looking at how can we meet the talent needs of businesses and still keep talent local. And one of the ways that we wanted to do that was to really look at youth and apprenticeships. And so we have partnered with all of our CPEDs to look at aligning CTE curriculum with current registered apprenticeship programs, as well as if there are none available, really looking to engage businesses to think about registered apprenticeship programs as a talent pipeline strategy. And so really excited about that. A lot of businesses with the talent crisis that we're having right now are really interested in apprenticeships. So I think that COVID has done a lot of things that have been really negative for our state, but I think that this has actually created some opportunities for our state as well. So really looking at apprenticeship as a way to meet some of those talent needs and help individuals with career planning and career laddering. So looking at making sure that MARC, and I know the advisory board's working with the Department of Education for this, but to make sure that MARC meets the needs of what CTE providers need as well as what employers need, and having that credential. So that's what we wrote into our grant. And then we also wrote in, so we're actually going to use both funding sources. So we're going to use the MiYARN and we're going to use the adult funding source because we also want to target some underrepresented populations in our area as well. So really it is a twofold project, working with the CTE providers to align that curriculum, and then working with businesses who maybe have started some sort of apprenticeship or have thought about it, or maybe they're just working at finishing it, and then providing those hiring incentives for them to continue using that as a strategy for talent. Thanks.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Natasha. Next, Danielle Bachman, Program Coordinator for Oakland County, Michigan Works.
Thanks, Callan, and thank you for the opportunity to speak about our program this afternoon. We are really excited to, be a recipient of the SAE grant. We received $625,000 from MiRAIN and MiYARN to register 250 apprentices. The goal is to register 50 youth apprentices, and the remaining will be adult apprentices. We are expecting to engage with over 150 employers in Oakland County, and then hosting or participating in apprenticeship pipeline building events, National Apprenticeship Week events. We are lucky enough to be able to offer up to $1,700 per apprentice to employers to offset the cost of RTI or OJT for their apprentices. And then we do actually have some funding set aside to provide supportive services for those apprentices that may be facing barriers to their employment and training. Our goal is to expand apprenticeships in new industry areas. So we're focused on IT, healthcare, construction, and advanced manufacturing. Those are really the industries that are heavily in demand in Oakland County. And then we'll also be engaging with youth, veterans, and those populations that are traditionally not represented in apprenticeship activities. And we're also hoping to update our Oakland County Apprenticeship Guide, which has been a great resource on apprenticable occupations. So our intent with this project was really to build on the structures that are already in place in Oakland County. So relying on our frontline staff at the service centers, working with their employers that have training needs, leveraging our relationships at the county level, and then our existing relationships with employers in Oakland County.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Danielle. And our last panelist, but certainly not least, just by virtue of coming from Upper Peninsula Michigan Works and starting with the U there, is Deb Bruen, the Chief Strategy Officer at UP Michigan Works.
Well, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you, Callan, for inviting me to join this great panel here. Upper Peninsula Michigan Works has its own unique set of challenges, being really rural based, but we are really excited to get this opportunity to serve our businesses and youth in apprenticeships. And so what we've decided to do is to serve 200 apprentices, 100 of them being youth and 100 being adults. And to do this, we've contracted with an organization called CareerWise USA, who focuses on the youth apprenticeship portion. And we get to brand them as CareerWise Upper Peninsula. So I hope you all get familiar with that. They have a really robust, tried and true model that has worked very well in many states in the US, and hopefully will do the same for us here. We are, like Natasha mentioned, looking at apprenticeships as a talent attraction and retention tool. When we're all looking for the solutions to how we can help our businesses, certainly this is one solid tool. In another way that we are focusing on making this work is by pulling in a lot of really key partners, one of which is a CTE leader in our region, Brian Cervello from Marisa, and then our MySTEM regional coordinator. And I think without them, we wouldn't be as far as we are down the road. With them, they make us so much better and helping us to understand how to understand what the barriers are for youth apprentices specifically and how to overcome them. And I think, Callan, with your help and Scott Yedley's help and the team, we're making good progress so far. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Deb. Great. Well, everyone was very succinct and much actually faster than I planned, which is perfect because now we have a lot of time for questions, a few questions I have here, and I already see some some questions coming in through the chat. So if you do have questions, please pop those in there or the Q&A, and we'll definitely get to as many of those at the end. But we'll just kind of roll through and really open to anybody, but I want to make sure you all get a chance to answer. I think most all of you mentioned, kind of challenges and barriers, especially COVID-19, and it's been a different, I can't even say year now, a year and a half, I guess. But what, I guess first and foremost, what challenges have you faced, but what innovations or promising practices have you found coming out of that, and just generally in the last year or so with expanding registered apprentices or apprenticeships? And anybody feel free to start, or we can roll through alphabetically, either way.
So I can start. So one of the things that we've done is we've really partnered with employers in helping them to work hand in hand with USDOL and utilizing our apprenticeship success coordinators to do that. Having our apprenticeship success coordinators meet with USDOL so that we can better help businesses with their work process and Appendix A, and getting that all together so that when we meet with USDOL, it's only once, maybe twice before those apprenticeships get approved. So we really do a lot of hand-holding with businesses to make sure that they get to that point where they're able to get that apprenticeship approved. And the easier that you make it, just like any of the rest of us, the easier it is, and the more apprenticeship interest we've had since we've been doing that. One of the other things that we do is with one of our biggest employers in one of our northern counties is we are the point of contact for their apprenticeship program. And so in order to get into their apprenticeship program, they have to utilize Michigan Works. And so then we're able to, we lift a little bit of HR burden for them that way. And we also are able to really know who the candidates are and what type of funding we're able to help that business or that participant with, because we're meeting them right away instead of trying to play catch up later. That's worked really, really well for one of our businesses.
So for Oakland County Michigan Works, as everyone else probably experienced, the pandemic taught us that we need to be as flexible as possible, working with both of our, all our employers and our participants. So really just emphasizing meeting employers where they are in terms of apprenticeship, whether they're completely unfamiliar with the process and have some misconceptions about what apprenticeship is, or they just need to get that, those standards signed and submitted. So really just being as flexible as we need to be with our employers, whether that's meeting them virtually or connecting them with the DOL and all of their great resources, just, working with them in the ways that they need related to apprenticeships.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
One of the things that we decided to do early on is becoming an intermediary for our businesses. And that really has helped the businesses to, agree to sign on apprentices, just taking that burden off of their shoulders.
I would just add that for us, in working with the building trades, because they already have established apprenticeship programs, the challenge for us as a training provider, as we've continued to provide apprenticeship readiness training, has the same challenge that many of you have faced in terms of switching to a virtual platform, which is a little more complicated for the hands-on type of training that we do. So a lot of it is classroom-based, but we've still been able to do some hands-on projects. It's a little more challenging given the COVID restrictions, but we were actually able to pivot pretty successfully to an online platform. And in some cases, it probably helped improve retention for, many of our customers. And we provided tablets if they did not have access to that, so they could connect from home. And we even conducted what we call almost a job fair, a customized job fair for our graduates, where we have contractors come in and meet with them. So the hope is to have a positive outcome for individuals when they complete training. We were able to do that online, which was, again, it was an interesting challenge. But I think, like most service providers, someone else mentioned meeting people where they're at. And, that's what we've been able to do. And I think in some cases, the virtual platforms have served us well. So even moving forward, we'll try to incorporate as much of that as we possibly can. Some things you still want to be able to do in person, face to face, but it allows us to actually reach more people that we probably would not have been able to include in in-person sessions. So that's really been the biggest takeaway for us over the last year, and just learning more of how we can continue to use some of the virtual aspects that we've learned over the last year.
Yeah, and I would kind of echo a little bit of Cheryl's comments there at the end. So JAMA has been doing registered apprenticeship primarily at the adult end since 2005, and we are an intermediary. We both we handle management of apprenticeship on behalf of the companies. We are a standard holder, and we're also a training provider. We work with our local colleges and other training providers as well, but we also offer training directly. So we had to really pivot hard because all of our classes were face-to-face, heavily hands-on lab-based. So going to a more of a virtual and hybrid model was a little painful for us, but we muddled through and worked through it, and working with the companies, we stepped up to the challenge. Similarly, we do a lot of youth career exploration and skill building for young people, going down into the middle school level and summer camps and that sort of stuff. And one of our summer camps is an overnight camp, a week-long overnight camp, 4th, 5th, and 6th graders. We had to pivot that to a more virtual model where we had parents coming and picking up kits and taking them home, and then through Zoom we would have instructors working through those STEM modules with those parents. It was a challenge, to say the least. And then additionally, primarily our apprenticeships were, as I said, sort of adult and 4-year, 5-year apprenticeships, if you will, tool and die makers and mold makers, etc. And we've moved more a bit to the technician level, shorter apprenticeships, and even moving from time-based to hybrid to competency as a result of the challenges. We've always been planning on moving to competency, but this was a kick in the butt to make us move a little faster.
Excellent. Thank you so much. That's fantastic. And I see we have a lot of questions coming in, so we'll kind of circle back to some of those as well. But one, I want to start, Cheryl, something you mentioned in your introduction, but then obviously we can open it up to everybody. But you talked about, specifically serving or looking to support underrepresented populations, and then also working primarily with the building trades. And I know that's something that I think a lot of people with apprenticeships think traditionally construction, building trades, and then traditional populations. So can you talk a little bit about the success you guys have already had, and then strategies that you're working on to kind of increase even more your outreach to those populations?
Sure. We have managed the Access for All Apprenticeship Readiness program since 2014. And the program was developed to create a pipeline of talent for the construction industry in the city of Detroit, because there were, just an explosion of building projects going on in the city, which is great. But I think the city was really sensitive to making sure that city residents would also be prepared for those career opportunities. And that's always been a challenge. In all my time in workforce development, that has always been a challenge, helping underrepresented populations make that connection with that particular industry. So the Access for All Apprenticeship Readiness Program was developed specifically to target City of Detroit residents, again, females, minorities, youth, veterans, who were trying to figure out how to get into the building trades. And in most cases, people don't understand what apprenticeships are all about, how it works, where do you go to even start. So in addition to the training that our program provides to help prepare people to qualify for entry-level apprenticeships, because each apprenticeship is a little bit different. But because we worked with the trades in the very beginning, brought them to the table and said, okay, what do we need to do? How do we build a program that meets your needs and provides kind of that front end piece? So we help with the outreach and the recruitment and preparing individuals. So when they get ready to make application to the operators or to the carpenters or the plumbers, they at least meet your minimum standards. That was critical, having the industry at the table with us. And I think anyone who is working with apprenticeships or workforce development understands the need to have that partnership with the industry that you're serving. So that made a huge difference for us. And, we started with maybe having 1 or 2 females in class. But as we've progressed through the years and we've had more successful outcomes for females, using that as a marketing and outreach tool, because people, it matters when you see yourself, you see people who look like you working in an industry that you probably never thought of before. So a lot of our marketing features African-American females who've completed the program. So we went from having 1 to 2 in class to having, with one of our most recent cohorts, having 50% of the class female, which is huge. And those women will recruit other females to come through the program. The same thing with people of color. Again, if you work in an area where you never see anyone in your neighborhood working in that particular field, it makes a huge difference when you see people who look like you. And what we find is that our alumni, they've turned out to be our greatest marketing tool, because they will help recruit other people. They understand what it took to make it through the program. They also understand the benefits because they're now working in the industry. So they've been able to help us, reach other folks who probably hadn't thought about going into this industry before, and really seeing it as a career opportunity, and a career where your education is free. So you're going to come out of this at, in 4 years with the other 4-year degrees, we call it, debt-free. And we've been able to expand to Kalamazoo and Battle Creek. And this year we're also expanding to Jackson and Saginaw. So, and just using the same process that we've used in the Detroit area, we feel that it's something that we can replicate in other areas, working with like-minded partners.
Excellent, thank you. Yeah, and anyone else, we kind of open up successes or challenges, but promising practices with non-traditional or underrepresented populations.
Well, I guess I'll jump in. So we've always struggled with this. I mean, manufacturing is also one of those areas where we don't see a lot of women. We don't see a lot of kids of color coming into the programs, and so Jackson County is not a major urban center by any stretch of the imagination, but we have an urban core, if you will, within Jackson, and we don't see a lot of our high school students from Jackson High coming out to the Jackson Area Career Center, which is sort of a feeder system for us, and we have direct programs that connect there. And so we started having conversations with community leaders and organizations that work within the inner city, if you will, and started to build relationships. And it became clear that for us to engage with that population and make any inroads, we had to go to where they are instead of having them try to come to us. So we've been building that, and we're seeing small incremental gains now, but we're not there yet. We're delivering programs directly within Jackson High School, and in particular with the Jackson Pathways alternative school, with students that have been, getting into situations where they are in jeopardy, if you will, of not graduating from high school. Literally putting programs directly into the school, working with the school. We had an after school program years ago that it's called My Enterprise, and it's a manufacturing company. Young people create a manufacturing company, and they work within that company, if you will. And we ran it as an after school program, but we're working with the high school and with the local organizations, nonprofits, to revamp that program and embed it right into the high school as an ongoing entrepreneurship program, if you will. And so then from that, we can look at opportunities to connect that to the apprenticeship program. So work in progress for us. We're seeing better numbers than we have, when we first started. I mean, I used to celebrate whenever we would get a female into our program. And then when, 4 years later, when they would graduate out, I'm like, oh, darn, we're losing another one. But, we're better now, but we have a long way to go.
Excellent. Thank you, Bill. And I'm sure it looks like we've got some questions coming in. We can kind of come back to this. But actually, it's a really good segue. Bill, you mentioned a few things, kind of meeting individuals, recruiting folks where they're at. And then also, I think that was kind of the main focus, but also, I think just kind of your perspective on it, and being urban core, but with a mix. But I want to ask Danielle, and then we can open it up as well. But you kind of talked about focusing on, in your project, I know you advanced manufacturing and construction, but also some of those non-traditional occupations as opposed to non-traditional individuals, but IT and healthcare. Can you talk a little bit about how you're working to meet those employers where they are and kind of expand into those newer occupations?
Of course. So, one of the things that we're trying to do is address the misconception that apprenticeships are just for the trades. And I know we hear that, time and time again, that, apprenticeships are just for construction or just for something like that. And when we know that there are thousands and thousands of occupations that can be apprenticeable, and that the apprenticeship model is a great model for talent retention and recruitment for employers, no matter what their industry is. And so we work with Henry Ford Health Systems to do a medical assistant apprenticeship, and then we work with Bosch to do an IT apprenticeship. And so that's something that we're hoping to continue, in the future through this grant. So our business services team are great working with their employers to meet their needs. We hope that it's apprenticeship, but not always. But in this case, it is apprenticeship. And so just, again, meeting them where they are and their needs and offering them a variety of opportunities to address their talent needs, including apprenticeship, and just opening their eyes to the opportunities that are out there that they may not have considered in the past. And I think that that's where our strong relationships with our employers will come into play, but also the, things like the reimbursements that will help them overcome maybe some of those internal concerns.
Excellent, thank you. And anyone else on the panel that is expanding non-traditional occupations as well?
So we were able to work with one of our local breweries and did a brewmaster apprenticeship, as well as a behavior tech apprenticeship at a center that works with people with autism. And so that was very different than what you would consider a traditional apprenticeship. And one of the things that we also did was, within our Michigan Works agency, we actually have our own registered apprenticeship. And so our case managers, our career advisors, actually go through an apprenticeship process. So it was twofold. One, if you're going to if you're going to preach something, you better believe it, right? And so we wanted to make sure that we knew what we were talking about and not just regurgitating information that we had heard or had been, read online or whatever. And so we're able to really talk to employers and say, we really do understand this process because we use it. And so I think that has really helped. And I was just talking to employers yesterday about apprenticeship, and one of the things that I mentioned was I kept using personal examples of apprenticeship that we've experienced. And so I think that when we can do that, when we can really bring it down to their level instead of using federal data, which is good data. I mean, it's true, but when you can bring it and make it personal to them, I think it's easier for them to understand and to apply to their business and how it might work in our region, instead of that's for the employer that has 100 or more employees. Well, no, our brewmaster has like 3 employees and uses this apprenticeship, right? So that has worked really well in our area when we're talking about non-traditional apprenticeships and expanding that in our region.
Well, I have another example, not nearly as fun as a brewmaster, I would say, but we have a potential for a jeweler apprenticeship and also a tailor apprenticeship. And again, in those smaller companies, 2 or 3 employees that are willing to take on the task of being a mentor for all the right reasons.
Excellent. Fantastic. Perfect. And that actually leads into kind of the next question I was going to ask Natasha, you and Deb. Both, you mentioned, being in rural areas with not as many apprenticeships kind of when you started as maybe Southeast Michigan, but also the fact that I think you both are working with, Natasha, you said the My Career Quest, and then Deb with the CareerWise and CareerWise UP. Can you talk a little bit about, other than working with the local breweries and the tailors and jewelers, how you're kind of bringing that into the rural conversation, working with rural employers and kind of bringing an unfamiliar concept to the communities? And either one of you can start.
Sure. I think, what's different for us is really focusing on the youth. And we're doing just as many adults, but I think it's a little more challenging and new for us to be focusing on how do we get the word out about the apprenticeships to the youth, and creating some really good partnerships. We have some champions, but we've also designated some of our frontline staff as our apprenticeship navigators, or we call them our grant navigators. And their responsibility is to connect with the youth that indicate they might have an interest and help walk them through that pathway. And what does it look like? So we're creating relationships with the K-12 schools and the middle colleges to help the school systems understand what the opportunities are, help dispel the myths and misconceptions that are really rampant all around apprenticeships. I think almost everybody's mentioned that. There are a lot of them, and you have to walk through that process with each person or each school separately. So we're still working out, some of the barriers. We haven't gotten through them all yet, but there's a lot to do to find the RTIs, the related technical instruction providers, when they are a distance away, 50 miles, 100 miles, a 2-hour drive. How do they get there? How do we engage those educators? There's a lot of work behind it, but there's a lot of interest. And we're just lucky to have really great partners at the table. All the educators are behind us in developing a consortium called 1UP, where there's no wrong door. It's just helping any anybody, not just youth, find the path that's right for them. And ideally, you know, an apprenticeship would be one of the more popular choices. Natasha.
Thanks, Deb. I think I want to echo your comments, especially about speaking to youth and apprenticeships. I think the generation that's coming up is really concerned about student debt and making sure that they won't be buried in it. And so I think that that's important to understand about the graduating classes that are coming up. And I also think that they want to plan. They want to know, how do I get from point A to point C, you know, and what's all in between. And so when we talk to businesses, I'm hearing more and more about career pathways and career laddering and how they're starting to look internally to find out, how can we promote from within? How can we grow our own? Because we're not going to be able to find the person on the street anymore that has the experience that we need. But we also understand that we're going to have a knowledge vacuum in a short amount of time because we also have retirees. And so they're kind of in this unique position where they really have to focus on talent pipeline, not just the immediate need, but future need as well. And so it's a really opportune time to look at how we might reach our youth and talk to them about apprenticeships and really to dispel a lot of those myths about not just apprenticeships, but even just manufacturing in general. And what does that look like? You know, there's a lot of automation that, talking to an employer yesterday, there's a lot of automation that has taken place, that there's a job that doesn't require the physical strength that it did prior. And so now it has opened the door to a lot of those underrepresented populations like women to be able to do this job because they don't need the physical strength that they may have needed 5 years ago to do that. And so looking at that talent pipeline, not just to meet my immediate needs, but from beginning to end, I think that we're seeing more of an interest in that, which is a great opportunity to talk about apprenticeships. And because not only will it help an employer with succession planning and career laddering and career pathways and all of those great things, it wraps it all into one, but it also will give that employee who maybe isn't starting at $25 an hour, right? Maybe they're not there yet, but there's a pathway to show them how to get there. And so, you know, we have found that a lot of people are willing to take that pathway if they can see it and they know how to get there. And so I think that that's important for our youth to understand, is that, you know, you may even graduating with a bachelor's degree, you still have to start at the bottom. You still have to work up. And I think apprenticeship just lays that out for them. And it's a great way to talk to them about career decisions and what that might look like, even at a, you know, really 7th grade level. And that's why we brought in the My Career Quest. You know, they start talking about, you're going to go into high school. So we start talking about it 7th grade, sometimes even earlier, but really at that 10th grade level where they have to decide, am I going to do dual enrollment, middle college, you know, 5th year college, or am I going to do CTE? And what does that look like? And so it's really an opportunity for employers to be engaged in that, as well as the education.
Excellent. Thank you. That's fantastic. No, really, really appreciate it. I have one last question from something that some of the panelists said, but I wish we had another hour, because everything you guys are saying is wonderful, and I might apply to a few of the apprenticeships up in your guys' area. So, but something Bill and Cheryl that you said, Cheryl, you mentioned kind of moving things to virtual during the pandemic, and then Bill, you mentioned kind of I think you said a kick in the pants on competency. I know those are two areas that are really new for a lot of folks, especially in apprenticeship. Can you talk a little bit more about what that looks like, what that means to your programming?
Well, for us, we will probably continue with a hybrid of in-person and virtual moving forward with the classes for the fall. COVID is still a concern, and that's one of the things that we're being very cautious about. But also, it allows us to utilize the instructors that we currently have and be able to combine classes. So it's a little bit easier. Instead of hiring instructors in all of the areas that we're serving, you know, we're able to use the experienced instructors that we already have. So just helps facilitate our expansion a little bit faster. And, you know, while we try to get other instructors up to speed, so we'll do in-person during the week and, virtual during the week and in-person on the weekends. So it, you know, it still allows us to do more hands-on. We were really concerned about the way students would interact with one another, because the fact that they come to bond with one another during that 8 to 9 week period, and they really, you know, they develop a very tight support system for one another. And we were a little concerned about that using a virtual platform. We're very pleased that that still seems to, it hasn't had as much of a negative impact as we thought it would. So, but you know, the in-person is still a really important piece. So that helps on the apprenticeship readiness training end of it, which of course feeds into apprenticeship opportunities. So for us, it's, you know, we're going to continue to use that at least through the classes in the fall, and then reassess in the at the beginning of the year. And that seems to be comfortable for our trades partners as well.
So on the competency-based side of things, we've really started focusing in on, especially on the U side and on the technician side of our program, and as far as, you know, launching competency-based apprenticeships. We've had a couple of hybrids in the past, but and we kind of look at this as a pipeline itself within the apprenticeship realm, so that we've aligned our shorter term apprenticeships, if you will, our technician apprenticeships, to our more traditional, if you will, 4-year apprenticeships. So the stuff you're doing to become a manufacturing technician applies directly to then if you decide to become a machinist or a welder or a tool and die maker or whatever, a lot of that is stackable, right? It counts. So that you get credit as you move up the chain. You don't have to start from scratch with each sort of level. So we've had individuals who've actually completed more than one apprenticeship and gotten more than one Department of Labor certificate through our programs. It's as we're working on the SAE grant, specifically the smart, we've created what we call the Smart RIC, the Smart Manufacturing Apprenticeship Readiness for Technicians Regional Implementation Consortium. That's a real big mouthful, but the Smart RIC is easier to say. And we've got 5 occupation tracks, 5 apprenticeships that we are launching, all 100% competency based, that's embedded directly in and overlaid, if you will, the programs that these high school students are doing at their career and tech ed centers. So as opposed to doing it as stackable or as a bridge or as a direct entry into apprenticeship once you complete those programs in the high school, or earning credit that you can then continue on with, we're putting it right into the program itself so that those students have an opportunity when they graduate from high school, if their CTE program is doing the work-based learning component that is necessary in order to complete the apprenticeship, that we give them an opportunity to literally get that certificate while they're still in high school. So they might get their high school diploma and get a DOL certificate at the end of that process. And it builds off of what we started back in 2014 in partnership with our local intermediate school district and our career center and our community college. We launched an early middle college that students are triply enrolled. So they're getting their high school diploma, they're working on an associate degree, and they're in school to registered apprenticeship all at the same time. Part of the problem or challenge with that is that it's really hard to complete all 3 of those at once. So we didn't start as competency based, but you could get close, but then you'd still have another year and a half in which you would work for your company to complete that apprenticeship. The model that we're using under our Smart RIC is I sort of think of it as the college comes at the end, right? It's a delayed college. So it's you're working on your career, your high school career, if you will, and registered apprenticeship comes along with the stuff you're already doing within those classrooms and the work-based learning component that you have as part of your career and tech ed program. And then working with the colleges to get college credit directly associated with having done that work and dual enrollment sort of stuff, you can complete the college as that next piece, and you don't have to try to take it all on at once as a student, which is kind of daunting. If you're a 10th grader trying to make a decision for the next 3 to 5 years of your life, and you're going to go into a fairly intense program that you're basically in a different world than all the rest of your peers, it's not easy for those students to make that decision.
Yeah, absolutely. No, and that's great. And I see, thank you. Many of our panelists are answering questions in the chat already. And I think part of that is, like you say, career exploration early. I know we don't have a whole lot of time, so I apologize. But Sally, do we have any questions coming through the chat that you can help us out with?
We do. The first one we have is, how are you working with individuals with disabilities in rural areas such as the Thumb and the UP counties?
And I'll get out of the way and let our panelists, anybody who wants to take any of these, go ahead.
Well, unfortunately, we don't have a lot of experience with that at this point. Certainly, we work closely with our partners at MRS and the schools. We're hoping to expand, our work in that area. We're still very new to it, I guess, what I would say.
I would echo that. I think that we work closely with our Michigan Rehab Services. What I have found is that when we collect demographic information, a lot of people choose not to answer that question. And so I wonder if a lot of people choose not to disclose that information. And so we don't know if we're working with individuals with hidden disabilities. And so we may be. I know that we have some that we've worked with that have had disabilities. And like I said, we work with our MRS folks. But if there's anyone on the call and that is an audience member, I'm sure that we would all welcome on the panel any ways that we might be able to increase that or do better at that.
I would just agree with what Natasha just said, that I think a lot of people choose not to disclose it. And depending on the industry they're trying to get into, I think they automatically assume that would preclude them from participating. So they often will not disclose it. But we do work closely with MRS, as others have said. And they, so we don't necessarily, we don't screen our referrals any differently based on the referring partner. When they come through the process, if they are, if they're able to meet the qualifications, then we move forward with that. And we find that the trades have been very receptive to that as well.
Thank you. Okay, so another one, I think we've got time for just a few more. And looking back, some of them you guys have answered, so thank you. One question we have is, how are we communicating the fact that there is so much funding and support available to employers beyond the current businesses? What about the public, the school systems, things like that?
So, at Oakland County Machine Works, of course, we rely on our marketing communications team, but we actually designed our RIC, our Regional Implementation Consortia, a little bit, I think, in a really interesting way. So we have an advisory committee, and that consists of, Oakland schools, Oakland Community College, operating engineers, a number of different partners to serve, provide guidance on the grant itself. But then we also have subcommittees based on the different focus areas of our grant. So we have a subcommittee on underrepresented populations, on veterans, on youth, and then new industry areas. And I think partnering with organizations that kind of fall into those different areas is going to help us get the word out, not just to our employer partners, but also the public, our resource partners throughout the county. So I think some of that more targeted work is really going to help spread the word.
Thank you. So unfortunately, we've hit our time limit. So that is the end of the presentation. There is time for visiting the exhibition booths after this. But I would like to thank all of our presenters today and everyone who attended. Hopefully there were some great takeaways from the presentation and that you're enjoying the conference. And thank you again for just coming to the conference, and we hope to see you again tomorrow. I will post again a link to the survey at the bottom of the chat so that you have it. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Looks like most of our attendees are dropping off, so you guys are free to go. But there was a lot of positive feedback in the chat if you have a second to kind of scroll through it.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Sally. And thank you for hosting and getting us all set up. And sorry I didn't leave enough time for questions at the end, but appreciate it.
Thank you. And I think a lot of the questions were answered throughout and by presenters after. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you all. I'll follow up with an email to everybody. And thank you guys again for joining.
Thanks for asking, Karen.
Thank you.